Good afternoon. Well, if I could only get my kids to be that quiet. That's fine. Give folks a minute to get situated and seated. Welcome. My name is Jim Baker, and I'm honored to be here and will be your facilitator and host for the celebration of John Werner's life. On behalf of Judy, JK, his wife Navia, his two beautiful children, Nisho and Kaya, Jordan and her husband Kevin, as well as the extended family, thank you for being here. For just a few seconds in time, take a look around us. The people, the beautiful weather, this legendary field that John Werner built, this little town of Arlington that John called home. What a tribute to a man who touched so many. As you may have noted, I did not refer to John as Coach Werner. There's no doubt that John was known as Coach Werner to many of you because of his incredible contributions he made to coaching. But he was so much more than a coach. He was a son, a brother, a husband, a father, a grandfather, teacher, and mentor. To me, John Werner was my friend, as he was to many of you and hundreds of others. Today is our day to honor the contributions John made to this world and to celebrate his 69th birthday. Happy birthday, John. John A. Werner was born on June 10th, 1949, to Anita and Edward Werner. He grew up on Long Island with his older brother, Bill. He graduated from New Baltimore, New York High School and went on to SUNY Oneonta, where he played soccer and graduated with a bachelor's degree in chemistry. He would later finish his master's degree in education. John was deeply proud of being an alum of Oneonta, where he developed lifelong friendships. Our first speaker is one of those close friends from Oneonta, Mr. John Bucci. Yes, yes.
Like the first I entered, as hopefully you saw, because I just came from Oneonta State. They had an alumni reunion, and during that time, they really got together, all of the John's old fraternity brothers, and they recognized John there also. And I'm happy to be here today to recognize John today. So therefore, I'm speaking on behalf of a very tight-knit group of people, okay, who are brothers of Phi Delta Rho from Oneonta State, who love John for an infinite number of reasons. To many of us at Oneonta, John was a brother before he actually became a true friend. We got to know John a little bit better, and as time went by, that brotherhood changed to true friendship. As our relationships grew, we came to know John for his true self. As you know, part dedicated student, part athlete, and more than part party animal. But most importantly, he was a good buddy, the best buddy you could find. And he would do anything for you. John took friendship seriously and treasured them always. Now, the friendships that we were honored to share with John started, as I mentioned, back in Oneonta, in our fraternity. We treasured those friendships from then until now. Although through the years, as time went by, when we were all raising our own children and attending to their affairs, those times that we saw each other became fewer and farther between. But John never, okay, let those friendships cease. He'd always put in a call to ask, hey, how's it going? What's up? What are you doing? And then we'd make some plans to sooner or later get together. Those times sometimes sooner turned into weeks, sometimes months, and even a year perhaps. But John was always there, never letting those friendships and those ties falter. And then we'd go ahead, and then after all that, we became empty nesters. And once we became empty nesters, John, okay, was the driving force that reestablished all those ties that we had throughout the years. John made sure that our ties continued to be strong and to be everlasting. John will always be on our minds and in our hearts. He will be body surfing with us in the waters of Shinnecock off of Long Island. He will be with us as we hike the various trails around Saratoga and in the Adirondacks. He will snowshoe with us as we snowshoe the Green Mountains and the Adirondacks also. He will enlighten us around fire pits each summer as we reminisce about the past and plan for the future. We will hear him shouting commands as we tube down the Battenkill. He will entertain us as we boat and kayak the Fulton Chain. And of course, John will always be with us on the sidelines at the Big O, cheering on the soccer team. John will continue to lead the way. We learned a great deal from John, a great deal about life. He was life, no doubt. John Werner set a high bar when it came to life and friendship. We thank him for that and for making sure that we will always be a band of brothers and sisters. Happy birthday, John.
In 1973, John assumed the title of Coach Werner, for the first time taking over the head coaching position at Arlington Memorial High School. He went on to coach for 31 years, touching the lives of hundreds of kids. Amazing, a record of 346 wins, 108 losses, and 31 ties. He won 7 state championships. His reach of touching young adults stretched well beyond Arlington. Through relationships he built with other like-minded soccer coaches and buffs. One of those Vermont's connections is our next speaker, Les Johnson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Judy, JK, Jordan, and family, thank you for having all of us. And all of you out there are clearly extended family. And I had to verify this with my daughter because she's more of a music buff than I, but Billy Joel wrote in one of his songs, "Only the Good Die Young," and we certainly lost a good one in John Werner. My wife and I, Nancy and I, were traveling through Arlington in 1973, and for some reason she said we need to take a left here. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I've never been in Arlington and it's some random left going nowhere. We took it, and sure enough, it brings us to Arlington High School. And in Arlington High School parking lot, there's one vehicle. And as we pull up to that vehicle, there's one person coming out the front door. It's John Werner. So from there, for those of you who know us, the rest, as they say, is history. So the reason we stopped was John was looking for a set of uniforms for his Arlington team. And Nancy and I had just started our business, and so we ended up selling John a set of uniforms for the school, and then hit upon this little idiosyncrasy that Nancy seemed to have some good luck with, in that anytime John tried on a warm-up jacket, she would just simply say, "Oh, John, that looks so good with your eyes," and he would buy it. So, it worked. It was great. So we didn't know at that point in our lives that we had this commonality. And as the previous speakers brought up, the fact that John went to Oneonta, and for those of you who don't know, the Oneonta's the Red Dragons. Well, I went to Cortland, and we are the Red Dragons. Oneonta is a pseudo-Red Dragon, because Cortland was clearly the Red Dragons long before Oneonta was. So we had that commonality, and of course that brought a little bit of barter back and forth, but we always had the Yankees in common, so that was good. So early on in our soccer friendship, we recognized the fact that the state youth was sort of each town doing whatever they were doing at the time, if they were doing anything. So we got the idea of starting the Vermont Youth Soccer Association. And of course, me being up in the Burlington area and John down here, it made a great match in that, okay, John, you got like the southern hemisphere of the state, and I'll take the northern hemisphere, and we'll be good to go. And so we started Vermont Youth Soccer Association. We also started the Vermont Soccer Coaches Association, which was an offspring of the National Soccer Coaches Association, where our emphasis was primarily getting Vermont coaches that couldn't afford or unable to go to the national level to come to a weekend conference where we would try to shed some of our experiences to them, and then they could give that experience to their kids. I believe it was in 1981 where I got the idea of starting the State Select program, which has evolved into the ODP program. And the idea was that, again, pretty difficult for someone, Arlington, Bennington, Brattleboro, to travel to the Burlington area to practice. So why don't we have 2 training sessions, and John, you got the southern, I'll take the northern, and we'll get together, have some matches, pick a team, go to the state select programs, play other states, have some fun, maybe the kids will learn, and once in a while maybe we'll win a game. So that's the way we started that program, and it was all good. So anyway, again, we've been involved through soccer primarily, and then through family over the years as our children grew, our children got involved in the game. We loved watching each other's kids play, and we shared that commonality again as we grew in our friendship. And then the last bunch of years, been involved with some golf, and so playing down south, we would stay at the Werner residence. Jordan, thank you so much for your room. Appreciate it. Been great. A lot of horsing around up there, but anyway, only if you've been in that room do you know what I'm talking about. Then again, the other thing that we had in common was getting involved with the National Soccer Coaches Association, where back in the early days, if your coach was not a member of that association, you could have the most outstanding player in the state, and they could not get recognized as All-American. So we sort of had a mission to get many coaches involved in the association so that their players could get recognized. And so we did that as well. So anytime I needed anything, this is pre-cell phone, pre-speed dial, pre-whatever, but it's 375-6310, that's the number I called, and there you go. And John was on the other end, and he basically did whatever we needed to have done. And that's really the way we rode, and as I said, it was an awesome ride. And John has touched so many people in so many different ways, whether he was your coach, your teacher, your friend, your mentor. He has had a positive effect on everyone in this area, and certainly everyone in this tent and outside of this tent. And what we need to do is take that touch that he had upon you, and how can you pass that on to someone else, the next generation. If you can do that, John's legacy will live on. Again, happy birthday, John. We miss you, buddy.
In John's 31 years in coaching and teaching at Arlington, his coaching was so much more than putting a team on the pitch and tracking wins and losses. He worked to develop young men and young women who would someday be leaders in their communities and their professions. It would take a very, very, very long time to list all those that he influenced who are leaders today. One of those young men he influenced is our next speaker, Todd Wilkins, the current boys varsity soccer coach at Arlington Memorial High School.
Good afternoon. Oh, I only got one arm, so. And of course, it has to be windy out. So, truly amazing day. As Coach would say, good day for soccer. I say we get rid of the tent, we'll grab a ball, we'll all just start playing. So as I sat down to prepare for today, I thought of all the things that Coach did for the Arlington community and for me personally. So many things to talk about. I thought, do I talk about Coach's amazing record? Nah, anybody can look that up on the internet. Do I talk about the numerous coaching awards, both in-state and nationally? Again, anybody can look that up. Do I talk about not the hundreds, but the thousands of young men and women that he touched? As I thought more about it, I came with one word. And that word is thankful. I'm thankful for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, I'm thankful that I had a coach in my life for 30 years. I'm thankful that Coach and Judy decided this is where they're going to live. This is where they're going to raise their family. We're truly blessed that Coach and Judy picked our community. I thought to myself, boy, Coach could have gone anywhere in the country. Probably could have coached any large D1 school. Certainly made a lot more money. But instead, he stayed right here. As fate would have it, Coach and Judy picked Arlington. Coach dedicated himself to the community. He brought his passion for the game of soccer, for coaching kids, and for that I'm thankful. In my opinion, and I think a lot of you out there will agree, Coach was the greatest soccer coach to walk in this very field. And this very field, I believe, is his second favorite place to be. I say second, because there's no doubt in my mind that Coach's number one favorite place to be was with Judy, his family, his friends, at his beautiful place in West Arlington. Coach didn't just teach us the game of soccer. He didn't teach us how to strike a ball properly. He taught us life lessons. He used this amazing game of soccer to teach us those lessons. I could sit up here and give you an endless list of lessons that Coach gave us. He taught us to challenge ourselves, and he taught us that not everything in life is easy. He taught us about pride, and most specifically, he taught us eagle pride. But with those endless lessons, two of them I am most thankful for. The first one, Coach taught us to give back. If you play with Coach, if you played for Coach, or even had the privilege to be a part of one of his programs, Coach taught you to give back. As you got older, and you helped teach the younger players the skills and the life lessons that you learned. For me, that went a little step further. I truly valued my time that Coach gave me and the lessons that he taught. But I felt those lessons had to be carried forward. I was fortunate enough not to just play for Coach. I was fortunate to have him as a mentor. I coached both middle school and JV level soccer under Coach, and when he was the varsity head coach here. And eventually I had the unbelievable privilege of taking over as the varsity coach when Coach retired in 2003. I'll never forget that year. I was pretty excited to take over the coaching position at a whopping 27 years old. I thought I had it all figured out for sure. And then one day, the Bennington Banner reporter called me. And he said, "How are you going to fill the shoes of Coach John Werner, probably one of the best coaches in Vermont?" I said, that's a good question. Actually, that's a great question. And then as this overwhelming sense of panic came over me, I said, holy crap, how am I going to fill those shoes? That's impossible. And then I remembered some of those lessons that Coach taught me. And I responded to that reporter, I'm not going to try to fill those shoes. Can't do it. So I'm simply going to keep the program he created going in the same way that he did. After all, I have one of the greatest mentors you could ask for. The second one is friendship, which has been talked about today already. Coach taught us that soccer is a game, a fun game, an exciting game, and in many cases full of disappointment. But at the end of the day, 20 years from now, you may not remember the score of that John James final or that loss against your rival. But you will remember your teammates and the lifelong friendships that you've gained. Sometimes not just with teammates, but even with opponents. For those of us lucky enough to go on one of Coach's trips to England, you know what the motto is, and that is friendship through soccer. The greatest friendship I gained through soccer was my friendship with Coach. As many of you know, if you became a friend of Coach, he made you feel pretty special. He was always there for a smile, a handshake, and for me, the occasional piece of advice. Throughout my life, Coach carried many titles. Teacher, coach, mentor, but the one I'm most thankful for is friend. This fall, I start my 15th year as a varsity cat coach. A pretty easy task after 15 years. What won't be easy? Not seeing Coach walk across that field. Not see Coach walk across that field at the end of the game with a handshake, a smile, and some friendly coaching advice. So I end this with a final thank you to Coach. Thank you for the lessons. Thank you for your friendship. And I truly believe, Coach, you're the greatest eagle that ever lived. And I truly believe they're out there teaching some lessons on a soccer field to a group of kids, creating new friendships. Thank you.
Our next speaker was also one of those young men that John mentored, developed, and remained in contact with. One of the amazing things about John was how he maintained contact and relationships with so many of his players and students over the years. But it was fate that brought Brandon Smith and John even closer.
Hopefully this is easier than I think it could be. All right. In many ways, Coach Werner has always been a part of my life. I was fortunate to have him as a coach growing up, annoyed to have him as an opponent in college, and incredibly thankful to have him as a friend and teammate just a few years ago when I began my battle with testicular cancer. As soon as I learned of my treatment plan, Coach was there for me. He offered rides, would often call to check up on me. And we shared many days together in the cancer center, enduring hours of therapy. I am and forever will be thankful for all the conversations we had and for all the time we were able to spend together, regardless of the circumstance. Our conversations during those days spanned the gamut of day-to-day struggles, successes, past stories, whatever was going on with Arsenal's management, gardens, the occasional review of the cancer center staff, all good, I promise. Coach always had a way of taking whatever challenge was in front of him and making it a learning experience. There was never an inevitable outcome. Every situation had a bright side, some takeaway that would inform how you dealt with whatever came next. He and I shared that in common. And sometime early in my treatments, he led on to this simple little word that he'd been using, Linneo. Losing is not an option. The idea, he explains, that no matter the outcome, if you give it everything you've got, you can't lose. There's always something to be gained. I recall thinking how great it was, how simple, shareable, inspiring. John wasn't sure what to do with it, but I knew he was on to something worth sharing with others. He did too. All he wanted to do was spread the message. He wanted others to know that no matter the outcome, the disease couldn't win. We'd persevere through the hardest of times, giving it everything we had. At the time, I had just left a job where I spent most of my days printing stickers. Brilliant. What if we just printed some simple stickers? We'd give people something they could put on their car, their laptop, their notebook, wherever. When I shared with him the sticker idea, he was thrilled, and the idea was starting to take shape. Within a few weeks, we worked up a simple design, complete with a first draft typo. Losing evidently only has one O. He was quick to point that out. When we got the typo fixed, a good friend of mine ran off a bunch of stickers. I don't even think he charged us. We just had a box of stickers. Coach didn't really want to benefit from them, but he was really conscious of the fact that people might want to buy them. So instead of selling them, he'd send them to whoever wanted them. All someone had to do was give them their address, and he'd mail out a sticker. And with the sticker, he'd include a note about his journey and his battle. In the letter, he'd encourage the recipient, if they felt inclined, to make a small donation to the cancer center. We rolled around a few ideas, decided his Facebook page was the best way to share with people. He thought a few people might be interested. I can't even begin to describe how much joy it brought him when people started to share his post, respond to it, and when he got his first few donations. Brandon, I can't believe we've raised over $100. We've raised over $200 for the cancer center. I just dropped off over $500. I think we're almost at $1,000. And then when they earmarked, I think it was like $10,000 for a match for the cancer center, he was just thrilled. The joy that it gave him on all those tough days when treatment was taking its toll and he pushed himself to get out of bed or off the couch to check his mail, seal a sticker in an envelope and send it out. The pride he took over the campaign and seeing all of the amazing responses from people through his social media. The phone calls he'd get from a friend who wanted 2 or 3 to share with someone that was going through treatment. The photos of cars from countries on the other side of the world with his sticker, Linneo, was something that could always bring a smile to Coach's face, something he was truly proud of. I wholeheartedly hope, as Coach did, that the message is shared with anyone facing a challenge in their life, especially those of us who are facing the challenges of cancer. Because the simple little truth found in those 5 letters applies to so much more than the outcome of a situation. I am so incredibly thankful for Coach Werner. Thankful for his support in my own journey, his years of mentoring and guidance, and for his contribution to this community, this town, this world. May you forever rest in peace. And I am.
John loved his family, to include his extended family. One of my memories with John was spending a night at Judy's parents' house in St. Albans on one of the many soccer journeys that John allowed me to tag along on. I saw firsthand the love John had for Judy's family and the love they had for John. One of those extended family members that John loved was his brother-in-law, Jimmy Hubbard.
Great day to forget your sunglasses. John Werner was my brother-in-law for 31 years, just like he coached at Arlington. 31 years. We first met at a Vermont State soccer coaches meeting in 1982 as I was coaching girls at Missisquoi. And immediately John left. An immediate impact on me just by his presence, his humbleism. I always wanted to hear you and not maybe brag about his accomplishments. He wanted to learn more every day. He wanted to hear everybody's side of the story. He was a great listener. In 1983, we really kind of just started to develop a friendship as he was the liaison for the Lions Cup game and had the opportunity of coaching the first girls game with some other mentors and colleagues. Lost a great friend at that time to cancer. But anyways, moving forward, 1984, I live in Swanton, and that's about 8 miles north of St. Albans, where John's in-laws lived. Day after Thanksgiving, I'm driving through the city and walking across Taylor Park is John Werner. John Werner, I take 3 looks. I go, what the hell's John Werner doing in St. Albans at Thanksgiving time? So I make the next right turn into a parking space, and I run halfway across the park, and I go, John Werner, what the hell are you doing here? He says, well, I'm up visiting my in-laws for Thanksgiving. I said, great. I said, you know, I just live up the town. Remember, if we're from Twin State, da-da-da, yeah. And it was like, great. This is cool. You're up here. Well, unbeknown to me, about 8 months later, I find this girl at a golf course, and I go, oh, who are you? And before you know it, we're running around and chasing one another during the nightlife in St. Albans. My brother-in-law's John Werner, and I go, no shit. So that's how it all began. And so we quickly became the two son-in-laws of just an awesome family in St. Albans. And as we move forward at Thanksgiving time, of course that was John and our anniversary of meeting one another in St. Albans, how many people here sold cheesecake for Arlington High School soccer? Well, you can see who ate them all. 4 came to every Thanksgiving dinner, and none came back to Arlington. Anyways, John was always busy. Somehow, divine intervention, I guess. In '85, before Jen and I were married, we came down to visit. Of course, I knew John, I didn't know Judy, but we said we'd go down and spend the night because John was putting an addition on his house. Well, up on the house we went at 7 a.m., me being a farm boy, oh yeah, we'll get up early and go. It was sunny like today, only about 90 degrees. So we tired his entire roof, and about 6 o'clock we looked at a couple of red tomatoes, and all we did was walk down to the Battenkill, had a couple of refreshments, and went in over our head and stood there and raised the Battenkill River at 10 degrees at least. So anyways, John was always very accomplished and had many awards. And in 1995, Jen and I were chosen National Milk Chair Couple as dairy farmers. And lo and behold, it was the same year that John was named National Coach of the Year. So we got to spend the same week in Washington, D.C. together. And one night, 100-degree weather, we're sitting in an Irish pub with other people that we had been involved with National Milk. And I said, you know, this guy's here, he's a National Soccer Coach of the Year, but he's my brother-in-law. And so that became the term that I used for many years to come. John always would come north when we were putting together youth programs in the late 90s and early 2000s, and it was always John Werner, Coach of the Year, Vermont Coach of the Year, 3-time New England Coach of the Year, National Coach of the Year. He's my brother-in-law. And so something that I will always cherish, I will always honor more than any of his accomplishments, was that we were brother-in-laws. As time went on, he gave one of my sons the opportunity to play at Castleton, and he proved what a family man he was. He actually taught Jack in a couple of classes, but he also helped Jack grow as a young man, and John cherished every moment of that, the 3 years that Jack was at Castleton. And just to see the excitement when Jack scored a goal, John, he acted like a parent of a 6-year-old in a first youth soccer game. Anyways, in 2015, a few years after I started coaching the boys at Missisquoi, I talked with John and I said, let's put together a home and away with Arlington High School for a preseason thing, and which Todd and I are about to enter our 4th year here in August of switching towns and sharing host families, and it's really developed a great friendship between our communities. And it was at that time when we made our first trip down as a team that in August of 2015, where John and I sat alone and he said, I've got cancer. And at that point he told me, it's too late. I'm not sure who he shared that with, but he for some reason knew it was too late. So from that point on, our talks, once a month, maybe once every other month, they got very sentimental. We shared a lot about family, how important it was to him. And he really had things planned out. Jordan hadn't been married, hadn't met Kevin at the time, or hadn't decided to get married until a year or so ago, but he knew he was going to make it through that. But he was worried that maybe he wouldn't. But I told him he would. I know he could fight it. And he had things played out. He knew where he was headed. He knew what he had accomplished. But he was always humble. John gave a lot of speeches. But his last speech was priceless. Sitting in a wheelchair, the day before he died, in front of all of his caregivers, all he could do was thank him from the bottom of his heart. He was so excited about the $30,000 that he had raised for Linneo at that time. And he never complained, not once. I knew it was going to be the last time I talked to him. And I said, "Brother John, I love you, and thank you for being my brother-in-law. So if I may, John, happy birthday, and I'm going to give the ball back to your side one more time."
In 2004, John assumed the role of head coach of Castleton University's men's soccer team. John's influence on young men continued, along with his ability to field winning teams. He amassed a record of 105 wins, 69 losses, 12 ties. He led his team to 3 NAC championships, 3 NAA tournaments appearances, and 3 ECAC postseason appearances. He also coached the girls' softball team. His leadership and impact led him to being inducted into the Hall of Fame at Castleton University. Past president of Castleton University, Mr. David Walk, will share some of those Castleton memories.
Jim Baker showing his customary class and dignity in organizing and facilitating this event. Thank you, Jim. That was beautiful. All of you, thank you. Last September, John Werner was elected by unanimous vote into the Castleton University Hall of Fame, and I was honored to introduce him at the ceremony. Soon afterward, despite his struggles, he took the time to write to me, thank me for the speech, and he told me about his favorite part, because he loved it when I opened it with, "I love John Werner." Everyone loves John Werner, but everyone really, really loves Judy Werner. So I'll open that way again. All of us here today are reflecting on the many sides of John's amazing life. So I'm going to reflect on his tenure at Castleton. No one in Vermont, and I dare say nationally, talks about soccer without mentioning the guru of Vermont soccer, whose life will always live on. Over 30 years bringing honor and glory to Arlington, Castleton, the state, universally respected, admired by all of us who were graced by his interactions, not just as a coach, but as a friend in our day-to-day lives. At Castleton, John was a quintessential role model, which extended well beyond the game of soccer. And it was his intellect, his work ethic, his character, his ambition, his skills, his knowledge, his wisdom, all traits that young people of all ages emulate. But I remember most the sportsmanship, on and off the field, win or lose, knowing that in losing you can also win. He showed us that, because LINAO. So many years ago, we were looking to rebuild our men's soccer program, having made some changes at Castleton. Went from 11 or 12 sports to 27, had started football, really wanted to build our men's soccer program. We had a change there. So I called my good friend, Bob Abrahamson, who many of you know, now going strong in his 80s, doing great. And I called him, he's sort of the grandfather, maybe the great-grandfather of Vermont soccer. I called him on a Sunday night, looking for some advice, and he didn't hesitate. So I called John. I'd met him many years ago when I chaired the accreditation visit here at Arlington, and I was really impressed with him then. And later when I was Commissioner of Education, I visited schools, saw him again, and thought, wow, this is a class act. So I've been impressed with him, not just as a coach, but as an educator, teacher, leader. So that was Sunday, 7:30 in the morning, Monday, he's in my office. The rest is history, including the soccer championships that Jim mentioned, more importantly, the lives molded and enhanced, and a successful stint as our women's softball coach as well. So let me tell you about that. Deanna Tyson, who is such a professional athletic director and for whom John had the utmost respect. Also Bridget Olson, who was here, who worked with John as a coach on that softball team. John had never coached softball before, but he had played softball. So therefore, like all of us, you play a sport, you think you can coach it. Or if you watch ESPN, you think you're an expert. But he was, because he utilized the same qualities that made him such a great educator and a great coach in coaching softball. He was a winner. He was a role model for not only our student athletes, but also the coaches of our 27 sports who looked up to him. His examples inspired all of us. So who else, think about this, who else that you know in the world of coaching or teaching would have been such an important part of so many weddings of former student athletes over the years? He sent me pictures of all of them. There were at least a dozen in recent years. And he was invited by his former players to be in or at his wedding. And to me, that kind of says it all. He never missed a teachable moment. During the journey of John and Judy in recent years, we learned so much about unbridled love, unconditional commitment, about your cancer dates to Bennington, experimental treatments, living together at Dartmouth, mutual support, undying devotion of your amazing family and your incredible friends, and really all that's important in life. So he was an educator in all the important senses of the word. We had a very personal exchange that will remain private, but in the last meaningful moment between us in that exchange, he joined me at the meditation center at the Rutland Regional Medical Center, which is this amazing place that my wife Lynn and I established in honor and memory of my parents. And it's where you can go if you want your moment of Zen, with soft music, soft lighting, comfort, reflection. Met him there. We shared a lot that I'm sure he shared with all of you. It was personal, philosophical, spiritual, not in a religious sense, you know what I mean, the real spiritual sense of the word, but religious too. So after that, I mailed him this note, which I will end with. It was sort of an ode to John Werner, titled You. John, you warm my heart. You and Judy are modern day profiles in courage. You're in my heart and on my mind. You made our Hall of Fame event so special and memorable. You showed such class and courage, and you allow me to reflect on all those moments with awe. You, John, are such a good man. You are such a good husband. You are such a good father. You are such a good educator. You are such a good friend. John, you embody education. You exemplify educere, the Latin educere, or leading out. Look at the back of your program, it says it all. You exemplify educere, leading out, which is what you do every day. You lead us, John. You lead us in making us believe losing is never an option. You are loved. You win.
The Reverend Bradford Clark, the former rector of St. James Church, could not be here, but he asked Judy if I would read a letter. John, Judy, J.K., and Jordan were among the first people I met during a visit to Arlington in 1994. The parishioners of St. James Church had invited me to come and serve as their rector in this beautiful small town where green mountains keep watch, where a cold, clear river runs through it, where waving to another driver on a back road is what you do. I soon discovered that the Warners lived up on a well-tended patch of land, overlooking the valley that leads west and out of town towards the New York border. I would visit them in the years to come and enjoy the view from their porch. Now, as I consider all I know about John, I think to myself, what a perfect spot for a good shepherd in a shepherd dog room to keep watch over their flock. John was adept at many things, but best at being a good shepherd. He said to me once, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. These kind words of wisdom spoken by a good shepherd. John had reason to feel proud for achieving many personal and professional goals. But the real source, his quiet contentment, peace of mind, appreciation for living, came from being a servant leader, from being a trustworthy shepherd. The good shepherd knows each of us by name, and in some cases by soccer jersey numbers. We recognize the voice of the Good Shepherd when it calls to us from the sidelines, amidst the cheering crowd, late in the second half, under the lights on Warner Field. With confidence, we follow that voice where it leads. We do so because we know John cares for us and would lay his life down for us. Every time he came down from that perfect spot on the mountain to teach another class, coach another game, lead another clinic, visit a member of his flock, he showed how much he cared. In return, we gave him our best. Losing is not an option. Neither is losing sight of how much John loved his mother, Anita, his brother, Bill, his wife, Judy, his son, J.K., his daughter, Jordan, and his dog, Ro. His way, too many cool cars, his prolific gardens, or the warmth of family and friends by the fire pit next to his house at night under the stars. Losing sight of how John blesses and enriches our lives, lives on, is not an option. Losing is not an option for those who gave their best, who leave all they have on the field of life, who care less about what they have and more about what they gave away. Thank you, John. Good friend, good shepherd. Brad. In a speech in November of last year that John gave to a group of Arlington residents, he started the speech out by saying this: "I love this town called Arlington." He went on to tell of how he drove into Vermont in 1972, not knowing a person. It did not take long for John to develop lifelong friends, and it's apparent here today. It was one of those many lessons John taught us over the years, the importance of people in our lives and meeting people where they were. Our next two speakers are two of those many friends from the Arlington area. John Wright will share some memories.
A couple of months ago, when this event was being planned, I told my son the celebration would be on this field. His immediate response was, "Dad, Coach wouldn't like that tent on his field." John did tend to be a little protective of his soccer fields. Given our mission here today, I don't think Coach would mind if we borrow Werner Field for just a little while as we celebrate his incredible life. I first met John Werner sometime in the mid-1970s. We were both coaching baseball then. I was the coach at Burton, and John was assisting Ken Nicholson here in Arlington. We were both young and new to teaching and coaching. It was behind the backstop at BBS before an Eagles versus Bulldog game that Nick introduced me to this smiling, charismatic, and somewhat long-haired fellow. Remember, this was the 70s. I liked him immediately, not realizing then that I had met a man who would later become one of my closest friends and who would have a great impact on my life. Our paths didn't cross again until Kathy and I settled in Arlington and started to raise our family. Of course, our kids played soccer. I soon came to realize that soccer was somewhat of a religion here in Arlington, and that John was the Pope. And what a Pope he was. In fact, he even convinced me, the old footballer, to coach my son's 4th grade team. Jim Baker might remember that. Our two sons, only a grade apart, grew to be close friends, and this naturally drew John and me together. Now, this wouldn't be a valid John Werner story without some additional mention of sports. You all know of John as the legendary coach, but he was also a pretty fair adult athlete himself. Over the years, John and I played men's basketball together. Doc Welther and Steve McClafferty were in that original group. I credit John for introducing me to these two who became my close friends. One of John's strengths was in connecting people. When John decided to get into golf, he attacked it like he did with most everything else, with a fury. Any other sport that John had attempted, he mastered fairly easily, and golf was not going to be kept off that list. Again, Doc, Steve, John, and I had many pleasurable golf outings. Pleasurable as long as John was playing well. He was very conscious of his score, and when he was in his acceptable range, he was happy. When not, well, we didn't talk about scores. John loved the game of baseball and was a lifelong Yankees fan. Our foursome, Doc, Steve, John, and I would annually go to a major league game. We all had our favorite teams, and John would agreeably yield to us as to which team we would go to see. Consequently, the Mets, Red Sox, and Doc's Cubs were the most frequent trips. But 1 year ago yesterday, for John's birthday, we finally got to Yankee Stadium, and John was home. We are all better people for having known and loved this friendly fellow from Long Island who came to this wonderful little Vermont town, made it more wonderful, and changed all of our lives. And even though my son was right about the use of a soccer field for this occasion, John, you are loving to see all of these faces on a field that bears your name. I used to remind John of all of his friends as the cast of thousands. The attendance here today confirms that, and John is smiling and nodding his approval. Thank you, Judy, for asking me to speak. It was an honor to share my stories about a good friend.
The next speaker was not just John's friend, but also his primary caretaker physician, who spent countless hours with John, Dr. Mike Welford.
It's amazing to see so many people, so many different generations of people. It amazes me how John was able to bring all these different people from different walks, not just from soccer, but from his high school days, his other teaching, the college, and things from other places and other countries. So who is John Werner to me? He was the coach who knew every kid's names on all the camps that he had. He was the one who remembered the jersey numbers of his players 30 years after the fact. He was competitive, as John said, and not just in soccer. Golf and basketball, he wanted to win. He loved his cars. We all knew him by his Jeep and all the soccer equipment in the back of his Jeep, and he really loved his green convertible Saab, as he went back and forth to Castleton a lot for that. He changed the fishbowl every first day of the month. He called Jim O'Day on every Super Bowl Sunday. He could predict what was going on in the Arsenal soccer game just before the announcers would say it. He could tell them what the lineups were going to be. He could tell them what the substitutes were going to be. He could say what the play was going to be before the announcers made that prediction. And as someone said, he went to, must have been 100 weddings from all the players that he had, particularly at the college level. He loved his Yankees, and he listened from the loudspeaker playing in his yard as he went through his gardens. I think he must have had like 8 different gardens that he took great pride in. He loved the pool, and he loved the summer nights where he could have a campfire, and he loved having parties at his house. He had his mother living with him and Judy for 21 years. How many people could do that? And I had to convince him that it may be time for her to move when he was diagnosed with this cancer, so that he could concentrate on himself and Judy and take care of himself through what was going to be difficult times. He loved the 6 months he was the interim principal at Wells School. And again, he got to know the kids' names in just the 6 months that he was there. He helped organize the middle school at Arlington School. And he really, really enjoyed helping to establish and promote Top Soccer, which was a soccer camp that he had with disabled kids. And he really enjoyed to see the smile on their faces, and particularly their parents, as he did that. So what are some of the takeaways that we have from this incredible person? I think we can all say from what we've heard today is that he had passion. He loved the game of soccer, he loved kids, he loved teaching at any level. Friendship through soccer was mainly friendship, and that's what he lived for. Linnell, we heard about how that was established, and that it was fundraising up to $30,000 or probably more by now, and some of that money was used to purchase equipment for the cancer center. He loved his family, and he always was so worried about being there for Jordan's wedding, but we were going to make sure that we were going to get him there no matter what. And he loved his grandchildren and all the time that he could be with them. His last trip to California was really difficult, but he got there and he enjoyed it. And I convinced him to use a wheelchair, which was not easy. He helped establish all the Arlington soccer club. He had soccer camps, 3, 4 a summer times. He did the softballs we've heard at Castleton. He gave coaches clinics, teaching coaches how to be better coaches, I should say. And he gave speeches, educational speeches, motivational speeches. He was such a great speaker. And as we also heard, within 36 hours of his death, he gave an amazing speech, sitting in his wheelchair and saying at the end, usually the speaker stands and the audience sits, but he was sitting in his wheelchair and gave a very important talk. He was always teaching, and I think he used every moment he could as a teaching moment. He taught us how to live, but I think importantly, he also taught us how to prepare to die. He was able to wear his emotions on his sleeve. He wasn't afraid to talk about his illness and about the struggles he was making. His 1,000 friends on Facebook, or whatever number it was, he was willing to share with them. He was not afraid to ask for help when he needed it, and he wasn't hesitant to accept the love that other people gave to him. And I think that's also very important. And I think the Linnell gave him a purpose that kept him going and gave him something to leave for others as well. He always pushed himself forward. I think the other thing he did was commit. He was committed from the beginning. If he wanted something, he knew how to get it started. He would follow it through. He would finish it. And his connection to people, as we've heard and as we've seen here today. He could stay connected to people for years and years and in so many walks of life. He became the mascot of the Oneonta soccer team. They took him in as the coach, the players. He was a celebrity whenever he came to the Oneonta soccer game. I think the other things he did was he was not afraid to visit people when they were sick, and he went and visited one of his good friends, Dennis Rice, multiple times in all kinds of places as he was struggling with his own health problems. He became close to the nursing staff at the hospital, at the oncology center. I think his legacy is all these things. He was a good person, a good friend. He was not only my best friend, he was my brother. And I think all of us should go and learn from these things and pass the legacy on of John Werner to everybody who we come in contact with. Thank you.
At this time, Jenny Harvard will share with us a song.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
We've heard this over and over again, just how much John loved his family. At this time, J.K. Werner will share his memories from the family.
As we gather here today in this amazing town to celebrate Dad's life, it is fitting that we do so on this pitch. Dad would be humbled and honored to see each of you here today. Most of you know him as a coach, as a teacher, as a friend. I wanted to talk a bit about my dad, the gardener. I have a fond memory of coming to the park with Dad in late fall and collecting piles of leaves in his trailer. I probably spent more time jumping the leaves than collecting them, but he enjoyed having me along, even if I was a neutral impact to the work at best. Dad would bring the leaves home and spread them in the garden before the winter snows. In the spring, he would till the garden, preparing it for planting. He cared about the soil, knowing that by cultivating the right environment, the rest would follow. It wasn't just the garden that he focused on cultivating the environment. On his soccer teams, he focused on making practices fun, and his classes had exciting demonstrations. He focused on creating an environment where people had fun, learned to love the subject, and most importantly, treat others well. Cultivating the soil is not the only thing to make a garden thrive. In 1995, Dad won the National Coach of the Year award, and we all traveled to Washington, D.C. for the convention. He gave a talk about setting the example in a player's game. He related coaching to gardening, saying, "In the garden, we set up the environment for the plants, and we supply the water and nutrients. Then we must step back." Dad supplied love, care, energy, and passion to his camps, his clinics, his teams, his classes, his friendships, and his family. With these nutrients, they, like his gardens, flourished, and each of us who were part of them grew. This past week, as we were preparing to travel east, my daughter Kaya looked at me sadly and said, with the innocence of a 4-year-old, "You don't have a dad anymore." I replied, "Kaya, I do. Granddad is still my dad and always will be." We talked about some happy memories. Hers included the two of them sneaking candy at Christmas. And I shared how I can still hear his advice and wisdom. The lessons that we learned from him, many on this pitch, his favorite garden, will live on through each of us. Thank you, Dad, for all the lessons, all the laughs, and all the love.
JK, your dad's looking down. So proud of you. John often told stories of making the decision not to accept a fellowship in Florida that would allow him to pursue his PhD, instead pursuing a teaching position. He wrote many letters to many schools, including Arlington Memorial High School. The then principal, Bud Town, responded, interviewed him, and offered him a job. John tells a story of driving into Vermont in his VW bus with his long, flowing blonde hair, a bag of soccer balls, and his Cocker Spaniel. When John told the story, he spoke of how lucky he was that he got hired, met Judy, raised a family, and had an impactful teaching and coaching career in this town that he loved. I did not disagree with John about much, or maybe a little bit. Finding out he was a Yankee fan, that was a problem. But he got this wrong. It was not him that got lucky. It was all of us. It would be very difficult to imagine this town and our lives not being touched by John Werner. Before we end our remembrance and celebration with song, please look at the back of your programs. On the back are some of John's most favorite material he used for countless speeches that Mike Welter referred to. These were more than materials to John. They were more than materials for speeches. He lived and modeled what he spoke. Let me just read the first. After a big coastal storm, thousands of starfish were washed up on the beach. A young lady was tossing them back into the water. A stranger happened by and said, "Why are you bothered? You can't possibly make a difference." The young girl replied, "To this one I can," as she tossed it into the water. 2 years ago, not long after John was diagnosed, he started the top soccer program that Mike Welter referred to for handicapped children and young adults. He did the program a second time last fall when he was not feeling well. I assisted with the program when I could. It was another lasting lesson from John. It was an incredible experience to see those challenged in life play soccer. What was more meaningful to me was to see the parents and the caretakers on the sidelines, watching the smiles on their faces, seeing their loved ones for just 1 hour, 1 day a week, for 4 weeks, have the same opportunity that others had in life. John was in the fight of his life, but he wanted, for one more time, to be sure he could get as many of those starfishes back in the water. Because for John, it was about making a difference. It's time to finish our tribute to John and his legacy. In his final months, John got to see his legacy unfold in front of him. We often talked about that. Not many people get to do that. This field we stand on today is here because of John Werner's legacy. I believe if we close our eyes, we'll feel that spirit of John Werner, and it will grab us. John did his part. In fact, more than his part. It's now up to each of us to carry that legacy on. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting Judy and the family. After our closing song, there'll be light refreshments will be served, and it'll be time for greeting the family and some fellowship. I would ask that you remain seated until the family leaves the tent. And also, if you're interested in Linnell, supporting Linnell, there'll be a sign-up sheet in the back. Thank you.